Hey Greg, thanks for being on the show. I was just watching your Twitch stream and you disappeared all of a sudden.
Good, now you know why I'm not on it. I'm doing all these podcast appearances for you.
You've been doing a lot of videos lately with fans of the show.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure, for a while, I'd been getting requests to come on podcasts, and it was one of those things when I had 2 jobs, I couldn't do it, because, I'd work all day at IGN, come home and have to do kind of funny video stuff, and so I just dropped everyone into a folder called Podcast to Go On. And finally, when I was like, all right, well, January I have 1 job, so I have no excuse. I wanted to make sure I booked them all out and took care of everybody. You know what I mean?
That's right. You all just quit your jobs, but you're even busier now than you were before.
Right.
When all of you were still working on IGN, you weren't fully able to express yourself on Kinda Funny.
Right, on our own channel. That was the whole thing. Is that, and I totally understand that, by the way. I totally understand and respect what IGN was saying. The fact that it would have been weird for basically their top, the biggest name, their face, whatever you want to call me, I don't know what you call me, one of their biggest hosts, to go out and go home and talk about video games or comic books or movies. That's all stuff I could have generated for IGN, but there's only so many hours in the day, so that's where it got sticky, right? The fact that I had so much to say about comics and games or whatever that I felt like I should be able to do that from home, but of course they didn't think I should, which I thought made sense. And we got to where we are now.
So would you have been able to come on and do an interview like this where you talk about video games and other media?
They were fine with that. What they were more concerned about was the conflict of interest or confusing the fan, right? Greg Miller on Kinda Funny is talking about PlayStation, then why should I listen to Beyond anymore? Where is, what's his real connection? And then even for them, right, it would have been weird for them to be, well, this is a fun video you did at home and it's doing really well. Why didn't you do that for IGN, right? In terms of coming out and being an ambassador for the brand, which I will be the rest of my life, obviously. I love IGN. That they were fine with. They were fine with me making appearances on other people's content.
So Greg, I'm wondering, are you a Zelda fan?
That sounds like you're setting me up to tear me apart in the comments. That sounds like he's not a real actual Zelda fan. I am, but it all starts for me with Ocarina of Time. Ocarina of Time was my first Zelda, because I was a Sega kid. So honestly, the first Nintendo console I owned outside of a Game Boy, that was contemporary. That was I owned it while it was popular, was the N64. And I'll never forget my friend going to Michael Bryan's house, and him and Jason Jason was watching Mike play and fight Ganon, and they were arguing if it was Ganon or Ganondorf or Ganondorf, and they had this giant argument. And I remember looking at this game and this is so stupid. What are you doing? Let's play the wrestling games. What are we doing? And finally, I remember I went to a closing of a Blockbuster. And this is in the 90s. This is how bad Blockbuster was.
Yeah.
That they were closing, and I didn't buy the gold cartridge for $5. And he was like, "You're so stupid. You're gonna regret that decision." And I'm like, "Whatever." And he's like, "No, borrow it." And he gave it to me. And I think he gave me a guide too, just in case I got lost or whatever. Yeah. And I remember it was the night before my ACTs, which are the sister test to the SATs or whatever. And I stayed up to 3 in the morning playing it, and I was just enraptured, blown away, loved it so much, and fell in love. And ever since then, that Majora's Mask, Wind Waker, I'm on board. And I thought, Twilight Princess, I enjoyed and beat. I didn't think it was amazing. It wasn't on the level I thought for the rest of them. And then Skyward Sword, I started into, and I was just I can't do this. I hated the Wiimote stuff. I just couldn't do it. I knew it was super long too, and that was still when I was reviewing games. So playing games that I wasn't reviewing was still a luxury. That was very much I don't have time for this. If I'm not enjoying myself. Now that all said, of course, the most recent one that I fucking loved was Link Between Worlds. Link Between Worlds is so good.
So The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. A lot of gamers consider it to be not just the greatest Zelda game of all time, but one of the greatest games, period.
Sure. It's number 2 for me. I still put Metal Gear Solid above it in terms of and I think a lot of that's navel gazing and what emotionally it all means to me, but Ocarina of Time's right there, and Majora's Mask is right up there too. Very, very excited for the Majora's Mask re-release.
The Ultimate Limited Edition actually just became available for pre-order, so I had to go get mine.
Nice. You got the little statue?
Yeah, it comes with the strategy guide as well. So what do you personally want to see in the next Legend of Zelda game?
I mean, the biggest thing for me, I want them to shake up the formula. I think, being somebody who joined so late, and it was all so refreshing, the Ocarina of Time, and then, Majora's Mask was completely different. But then when you start getting into Twilight Princess, started off and I'm this feels a lot like or even Wind Waker, I'm sorry, too. They all start and feel the same. You're getting your wood sword, your wood shield. This is how you go out and this is how you do it. It's one of the reasons, obviously, A Link Between Worlds is so great, right? You jump in, you know Zelda, go play these dungeons. It's like, awesome, great. I don't mind like starting off as a lowly whoever in town to become the hero of time. I love that. But just, I want the story to be super different. And so what they've shown, right, with that giant expansive world, and you see the top of the tower and you can go to it and do all these different things. I really hope, like, and I know this is totally hackneyed and the internet's ruined it, but I hope it is Skyrim Zelda. I hope it is that there's like quests to pick up along the way and do different things and it get lost in that world for hundreds of hours.
Nintendo's last original Zelda game on home consoles was The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. How do you think it managed to get 9s and perfect 10s in reviews at a time when gamers were already used to beautiful HD graphics, worlds the size of Skyrim, and incredible voiceovers?
Sure. I mean, Nintendo's entire hook, right, is gameplay. Right. It's making games that are fun to play, and I think when you pair together really great gameplay with really great characters and lineage and history, that's where it all comes down to, right? Like, there's a reason everybody loves Mario. You know what I mean? Because these games are great, and then he continued to be cute, and then Mario 64 comes around, and he's this, like, cartoon character that you control and does all these different things. Like, the power of nostalgia and then the fact that nobody makes better gameplay games than Nintendo, like from strictly speaking of a video game, like what you expect out of them, that speaks to people and that resonates throughout time. And I think that's one of the reasons people can still go back up and pick up Link to the Past and have a great time with it. You know, you always talk about Nintendo games being timeless, like, and the fact that whether you're playing Super Mario Brothers on our NES or you're playing, you know, Super Mario Galaxy 2, like, these are games that are fun and breathtaking and do different things.
This next question comes from Pendio on Zelda Dungeon. He says, voice acting is such a much heated topic in Zelda. A lot of games like Destiny that have incredible gameplay are often held back by poor voice acting. Do you think voice acting would have a positive or negative impact on the Zelda franchise?
I think they've waited too long and they know it. You know what I mean? I think Zelda, for the rest of time, has to be a... never say never, right? It'll be the game after this that has Zelda voice acting. But, like, it's... At this point, like, they're living storybooks when you play them. And you know what I mean? Like, to give Link a voice at this point would be insane. You know what I mean? All we know is... Like, that's fine. That's good. I can live with that. I don't need anything beyond that. And if you... I mean, it's... Then, like... Just, like... you know, when you think of Zelda, right, you think of gameplay, you think of music, and you think of the way they use sound, right? Like, when I think of the Gorons, I don't think of a gruff voice, I think of that heavy beat that suddenly comes in, you know what I mean? And, like,
exactly.
The way they communicate without using words, I think, is fascinating, and it's one of those things that's truly a work of art.
So, Greg, obviously we're all looking forward to the new Zelda. But if you had to list 2 games for each of the new current-gen consoles that were coming out, what would you pick?
I'm going to write them down here. So it's for each of the consoles. So X1, PS4, Wii U.
Yes.
And it can just be any time, or does it got to be super soon?
Just any time. Just
okay,
coming
good.
out in the future.
That was gonna make it tough for Wii U, no offense. I'm putting Zelda on there for sure.
Alright.
Can I put their next, even though it's not announced or anything, their next Mario game, obviously. Their next, like, you know, okay, there you go. So that's what I and I think most people buy their Wii's for, right? Your Nintendo products you buy for Nintendo first party.
Yeah, all their
same
first
thing.
party games.
Exactly. PS4, same thing. I'm putting Uncharted 4 on there. Now, see, then you start getting to exclusives, right? Like, for Xbox, I don't have anything. I don't care about the Halo. No offense to Halo. I totally respect it. It's just not my thing.
Right.
So for X1, I'm going to throw Batman Arkham Knight on. I can't wait for... Are you excited for Arkham Knight?
Yeah, I'm definitely excited. I loved the first 2, but I had to skip out on the 3rd one. Well, I know a lot of people didn't like it because it wasn't the same developers, but that's not why. The reason I ended up selling my PlayStation 3 before I got the chance to play Origins, so I had to miss out on it.
Ah, okay. That's understandable. I've been there. Don't worry about that.
Yeah.
And I need one for Xbox One and one for PS4. And it's one of those things, there's so much stuff coming out. I'm going to put for PS... See, that's cheap, but I'm going to put for PS4 Hotline Miami 2.
Right. launch.
Right. I'm probably gonna play it on Vita if I'm being honest, but I'm putting it on. Excellent. No Man's Sky jumps to mind, but I can't put that obviously on Xbox One. Bloodborne, can't put that on Xbox One. This sounds like I'm ripping on Xbox One. I'm not, I assure you. Oh, no, that's shit.
Yeah, I'm in almost the same situation. I bought an Xbox One, a PlayStation 4, and a Wii U all on their launch date, and my Xbox One just sits there while my Wii U and PlayStation 4 gets played all the time.
Yeah, like that was my thing. You know, I bought my Xbox One and PS4 right at launch, and a lot of people are like, "Why are you? But you don't need both." And I'm like, I know I don't need both, but I want both, so I can talk to each one, right? And it's interesting that for me, and it's not interesting seeing as I covered PlayStation for so long. I know so much about it. The fact that my Xbox One's my exclusive machine, and I bought it full well knowing that. You know what I mean? I bought it expecting only to turn it on for stuff. I need to play Sunset Overdrive still. I still need to go through the new Titanfall DLC they put out that I thought was really, really cool. I have notes in here where I listed all my games that I wanted to put in my 2015 predictions.
Right.
I'm trying to find it, but it doesn't look like it's going to go well. Crap, I'm stupid. I have a whole list, but all I'm thinking of is stuff that's exclusive to PlayStation. Hold on. We're opening it in the drive over here.
Alright.
This, I want to give you the real answer here. I'm not going to cop out. I got plenty of games I'm excited for. Hold on, yeah. On notes. Notes. Oh, there it is. Witcher 3. There you go.
Witcher 3 looks like a really great game.
Witcher 3 looks awesome, and I'm totally one of the fakers who didn't play Witcher 1 or 2, but like Witcher 3 looks awesome. Everything I've seen for it's great. This is the games I'm looking forward to. I have listed here. All right. I got Uncharted, Witcher 3, Persona 5, Batman, Firewatch, Hotline Miami 2. I put Dead Island 2 on there just because I'm interested to see what they do. Metal Gear, Below. I want to know what happens with what's the other Dead game? Dying Light. And then I'm interested in H1Z1 next week. You know what I mean? There's a lot of games.
So is that your personal list or something that you were working on for IGN?
No, that was a list for I guess technically it was for the YouTube channel. On youtube.com/kindoffunnygames, we do a show called the Kind of Funny Games Cast, and so Tim had a topic of what games we were excited for next year, and so that it's one of those things you just saw me try to put it together without the list. I knew I needed something, so I wrote them down just so I didn't sound as stupid on that show as I sounded here.
Is there a game from your childhood that you're so nostalgic for that you would love to see brought to current gen, whether it be just an HD port or a full remake?
Oh man, I mean, I'm about to go through the whole rigmarole of good old games and everything else to get the Ghostbusters version that I fell in love with. That got me into video games, the Sega Master System version. If they could get the rights to that bad boy and put it out, just whatever, just put it out. I don't care. Just put it out like every other 8-bit game they put out. That'd be awesome.
Right.
In terms of something like, to reboot from my childhood or put it all out there and, stunning HD crazy graphics. I don't know. I wish we, as an industry, I like it when we just make new IPs. You know what I mean? Going back and chasing stuff rarely works out super well, right? Like, how many times did they try to redo Spyro and it just didn't work until they put Skylanders in front of it and made it all completely different? Didn't even need it for that.
This next question comes from James Watt from a podcast Beyond Facebook fan group. He asks, how would you react if Sega reintroduced themselves into the console wars?
I would laugh so maniacally. Because it would be like one of the biggest what the fuck are you thinking moments. Are you kidding? Like, that I'm a Sega kid, I was through and through the Saturn. And then when the Saturn ruined me, I was like, never again. Right. And it's Sega's, I don't mean to knock them or anything, but it's a sad tale of Sega, right? Where it's just like, they lost their footing in that console war and then never got it back. You know what I mean? They never ever got it back. And the stuff that we all loved critically, like Valkyria Chronicles, like that just doesn't happen anymore, right? Like that's not something they can put out and be profitable about. So they keep making Sonic games and then keep doing license work. And it's just like, it seems like they've had a really, really rough and tumble career. God, you've been waiting a long time then.
Greg, obviously Nintendo's not doing as well as Sony and Microsoft in the console wars. Do you think they could pull a Sega and just release software?
Oh, they know they could. They won't, though, anytime soon. That's what's fascinating about Nintendo, right? Is that they have so much money in the bank, and I don't know. I feel like the Wii was the anomaly that changed the way everybody perceives Nintendo.
Right.
Once the GameCube, once like the N64 era started winding down, you're like, man, nobody's making games for the N64 but Nintendo. Then GameCube came along, and Colin and I argue about this, but the only games like you really had to have on GameCube were the exclusives. Like you were getting PS2 was doing, I thought more interesting things, so I was playing all my third-party games over there, not on the GameCube. And so, if it's not exclusive, I felt for a long time like, why would you play it on your Nintendo? And I didn't buy a PS3 launch. I didn't buy an Xbox 360 launch. I bought a Wii U day one because, a Wii day one because I thought the controller was so revolutionary and being able to do that. And plus, they sold me on the Virtual Console, because I was a Sega kid, so I missed all these games. And I'm like, yes, I want to play this lineage of Nintendo excellence. I want to see what the hubbub's been all about and do that. And then I want to play, obviously, the new Zelda. I want to play the new Marios. I want kart. I want golf. I want all these things. And so that's what I went into. And then when it exploded and everything was trying to do, it's like, well, I wouldn't play any of those other games on my Wii. And now with the Wii U, it seems like, it's almost like if you look at the Wii U, you can almost put your hand over everything that happened with the Wii and see the transition from GameCube to Wii U. And for me, it's the same thing. I finally got a Wii U when we got close to Mario Kart, and I knew I'd want it for Smash. And so that's what I have out there. That's what I have. What I play on my Wii U. That's the whole reason I do it and play what I play. It's just because I want those experiences.
Now, I love my PlayStation Vita, and I know you do too. But lately it seems Sony's been slowly killing it off by almost always refusing to talk about it at E3 and other conventions. So what would you like to see as its swan song, the last great game released before the Vita's successor?
If there's one final great game from them I want a Patapon. I want Patapon 4, and I want it in stunning, be HDified. I want trophies, which no Patapon has ever had. I want the amazing online suite of Patapon 3. That's what I want. And the Vita is such a weird case. I think the Vita is very much the Nintendo model of I have my Vita for these games that once in a while that'll come around. You know what I mean? And now obviously all the indies. I'm super stoked to replay Bastion on Vita. Yeah, totally. I love Bastion, and that is a game where it's beautiful, and I love it on my big screen, but it's also something I could easily have with headphones and have a much more personal experience with that awesome, rich voice in my ears and doing all the different content and trying to platinum it or whatever the hell I have to do with it. I stand by the fact that I'd still love to see an Infamous come. I know it won't, but an Infamous would have been rad on it. You know what I mean? Just an open world. Even just port Infamous 1. You know what I mean? I don't know if it's even possible. It probably isn't, but that'd be rad.
The last console generation had a slew of gimmicks, mainly being touchscreens on handhelds and motion controls on consoles. It seems like this generation is going to focus more on virtual reality headsets though. What are your thoughts on combining Kinect-like motion controls with VR headsets, and where do you see the video game industry going in the future?
I think if anything, what I hoped and I still hope for is that this generation has already shown that it's about games and gameplay. You know what I mean? Sony has jumped out to a substantial lead based on their February conference of hey guys, we screwed up with the cell processor. This is going to be this is a high-end PC. It'll be easier to get your PC games over. Come do them with us, please. We want your games. Hey, this, that, and the other. They tried to make Move happen there a little bit in the controller, and then they walked away from it. You know what I mean? They tried to make the touchpad happen, and now no one's doing anything with it. Vita tried to make touchscreens work, and nobody's doing anything. And you're just seeing people boil it back down to, here are games, and that's what I want to play. Right. So I personally think virtual reality is really cool. I've used the Oculus Rift, and I'm like, whoa, this is really cool. When I looked up and they let me fly, I was like, if you make a flying game where I can be Superman and just fly around and not help anybody, I'm totally in. And the same thing with Morpheus, where I put it on and I did the luge game, and I did this and I did that. I'm like, these are all great, fun experiences that I don't want to play at home. And maybe that changes. Maybe something comes along and is revolutionary, but it's the same thing as why Move didn't work and why Kinect didn't work either. It's just that's not what we want. We want to get lost in games and play games. And they already put another barrier to entry out of all right, here's Morpheus. It's going to be, we'll say $150, probably $250, this add-on. The market immediately shrinks, right? And when you have it already shrink, you're going to have a wave of first-party games at launch, probably something from Ubisoft and EA, and then nobody will come out and support it again. That was the big thing. If they would have made when it looked like they were going to commit to move, and I think they would have. Colin always talks about this too, that, you know, like the light bar is there as a relic of them having the camera bundled in with the system. If the system would have been bundled with the camera, we'd still have more move shit getting shoved down our throats. But once everybody's like, this isn't mandatory, then they're like, fuck it, why do I care? Why would I ever do this? Right. And that's how it is. People want to make great games. They don't want to make games. They don't want, I mean, there's always going to be a Medieval Moves, Deadman's Quest, or Sports Champion that really makes use of it in an awesome way. Right. But those are two of like a couple dozen move games that got released, you know what I mean? Like, it's just not worth it.
Greg, a lot of your fans like myself have already had jobs in video game journalism, but could you give some advice to the fans that are interested in making that leap from a smaller website to a media giant such as IGN? And even some advice for the people that haven't even made that first small step toward writing? And share with us how you got into video game journalism.
Right, yeah, I mean, the first step is to do it, is to just get out there and do it. Have a blog, and then, like I always say, nowadays, have a blog, podcast every week, make video vlogs for YouTube of you talking, learn how to edit on YouTube, do all these different things, and understand that for all of those things, none of it is about making money or getting views. Right. Like, you're going to put out these podcasts, and you'll be lucky to get 70 listens. And you're going to put out these videos, you'll be lucky to get 10 views. And that may make you feel dejected, may make you feel like you're on the wrong track. You're not. It's really, really, really hard to talk nonstop and know where you're going with the sentence. It's really, really, really hard to be able to put together a coherent thought verbally and get it out and make it stick for people. It's really, really hard to, you know, interview someone and be able to keep your next question in your head while listening to their answer, while piggybacking off of their answer. I mean, there's like, all of this comes with repetition, with doing it over and over again. I always say, even though it doesn't seem like it, and I get laughed at a lot, podcasting and then everything I just talked about is like a muscle. You got to flex it and you got to work it out. When I started at IGN and they started putting me on podcasts, I was awful. I didn't know when to interject. I didn't feel like I was confident on the mic. I didn't know what to say. And now, we just went to Patreon today, and you know, they gave us a round of applause when we walked in. And we had lunch with them, but when we got there, they were like, speech, speech, speech. And I climbed on a table and gave this like speech off the top of my head that I had no intention when I got in the car today to go do. It's like and I wouldn't be able to do that. I always go back to Tough Enough. There was the WWF show where Taz was a trainer, and he made a joke that if he ever, you know, like they were taking bumps over and over again, just falling on their back and slamming the mat and slamming the mat. Everybody's getting black and blue and the wind knocked out of them. And Taz is like, we do this over and over again so that it's reflex. He's like, I could slip on a patch of ice tomorrow and I'd take the bump right. And he would just unexpectedly and naturally go down. Like, that's what this is all about, is being able to do this naturally. Now, how did I get in the industry? I got in by doing exactly what I talked about. You know, I knew in the 4th grade, I had initiated Game Pro. And I'm like, I'm going to write about video games one day, Mom. And she's like, we can make that happen. You should go down this journalism route, yada, yada, yada. So I go to the University of Missouri, which is the #1 journalism school in the country at the time. It is again now. It goes back and forth with Medill a lot. Shout out to Northwestern. But I go there, and my line of thinking is, I'm going to get this journalism degree in magazine journalism, and I'm going to leave, and I'm going to be able to I'm going to go work for EGM immediately. They're going to not be able to resist me. I'm going to have this degree from this journalism school. It's going to be amazing. And I graduate, and nobody will touch me with a 10-foot pole. And I couldn't get it, so I went to work for a local newspaper, started my own Gmail account, and then I applied at IGN over and over and over again. Right. And on the 13th time I applied at IGN, I got contacted, interviewed, and hired within 24 hours. Literally, my life changed overnight. And so when I got out there and I signed the paperwork and it was all official, I said, what the fuck? What changed? Like, I've been applying for a year and a half, you know what I mean? Like, why suddenly did you want me so quickly? And they're like, you finally proved you could do it. You know what I mean? The 12 attempts before then, I had a clip about video games here, or a blog here 6 months later, or this thing, you know what I mean? Like, there was no consistency to it. Right. When I got hired, it was the first time I had applied, and after this 6-month stint I had been doing of a weekly video game column and a weekly video game blog. I showed that I knew what I was talking about. And so then it was a no-brainer for them to pick me up.
So they weren't just looking for people that had degrees, they were just looking for people that had the experience. Right.
The degree is cool, and it shows that I can finish something. That's what Colin always says, but it's not mandatory. Like, people who get hired and succeed are go-getters. They, like, you know, that sounds dumb, but I mean, there's a passion to what we do, right? Like, normal people don't quit their jobs and bring the business into their spare bedroom and work more hours than they did when they were getting paid a lot more at their old job. You know what I mean? But, like, there's this passion to everything we do, and that's what sets video games and our industry apart from so much. And that's why I love the term enthusiast press, because we're all enthusiasts. We live and die for this shit. And so to get out there and, like, show that to people, they immediately can tell. Like when I met Brian Albert, who now works at IGN, 4.5 years ago. I went home to Chicago for Thanksgiving. I did a meet and greet at Portillo's, and Brian Albert and his girlfriend at the time were the first people there. And they tweeted me and like, "We're here. Can we do anything like push tables together?" And I got there and met him, and he, we were in Chicago. He was from Iowa. He had driven overnight to make this meet and greet. And all he wanted to do, and just the way he talked about what he was talking about, I knew he was going to make it. Same thing with Vincent Janito. He snuck into Beyond 200. He had moved across the country to try to get into video game journalism. And it's like, oh, you're going to do great. Like, you just know. There's people you can see it and sense it in each other.
So were you and Colin both hired right away, or did you have to go through an internship?
No, I got a job right away. I got hired on as an editor for the PlayStation team. And then there are a lot of intern success stories. Obviously, Hillary, who went on to run IGN in general, was Colin, obviously is the biggest one, the most recent one in terms of who we know. Sam Claiborne had done it too. I think that might be wrong, but I think, and there's a lot.
So when you and Colin did both start out, even though he started as an intern and you got your job right away, you two have similar stories.
We have similar stories, yeah. Colin, when he was an intern, came out and slept on Fran's couch, I think. And then when I got hired, I moved in for a short-term lease with a fella named Micah, who's famous on GameScoop. Right. And I lived in his room on a spare room in his place on an air mattress for 9 months, where I just sat there and just played on my Tube TV Guitar Hero and hung out. But that's what it is, right? We all knew that this is what we wanted to do, and so you get here any way you can.
Greg, this next question comes from Facebook from Yair Donan. He wants to know how your transition from reviewing to hosting has had an impact on you and how video content is more prevalent in the media and to consumers today.
Yeah, I mean, that was interesting. I never went to J school or came to IGN expecting to be on camera. I would say the two things I didn't expect about the job, and both were silly, were the travel and the fame. You know what I mean? I never read EGM and thought, oh man, they're talking about TGS. They went to Japan. Like, that just never clicked into my head. And it was weird that I never thought about people caring about me as a person because I had Dan Hsu on a pedestal. Like, he was like my idol, you know what I mean? Later I'd meet him and lose my mind and not be able to speak. So it's that weird thing there. But the transition happened naturally based on what the internet was doing. You know what I mean? I remember when I got there and YouTube was just a thing recently. And like, nobody really knew what to make of it yet. You couldn't monetize, you know. There was debate if IGN should put content on YouTube. And, you know, it was just as the internet got to a place where internet video was a real thing and it was getting easy and it was getting affordable and the quality could look good, that it was like, okay, well, let's start putting editors on camera. Okay, Greg seems to be enjoying this and makes time for it and is enthusiastic about it. Let's let that happen. And it just shows the ebbs and flows of the industry and that wherever people want it to go, it's going to go.
Greg, you and Colin play such huge roles in the PlayStation community thanks to Podcast Beyond. How do you think you've affected the PlayStation community? I mean, even the president of PlayStation is a huge fan. He even smuggled Oreos across the border for you.
It's a responsibility. You know what I mean? Like, we don't take it lightly, and we're honored that happened. And I think, again, that is just another thing of, you know, it's a product of how our careers went, right? Like, you know, 7 years ago, we start Podcast Beyond, and it's when PlayStation 3 is getting the shit kicked out of it, and nobody likes it, and it's too expensive, and the games aren't great. These are all things I said, because I didn't buy a PlayStation 3 for like the first 2 years of Beyond. Right. And there was other people who felt that way. You know what I mean? I always talk about the fact that PlayStation 2 was this huge thing, and everybody loved PlayStation 2, and then when the Xbox 360 comes around, brings down the population of who cares about PlayStation, and then PlayStation 3 comes out and says all the wrong things and does all the wrong stuff. It cut it down to this core, where we were this core of people who still cared about PlayStation and wanted to talk about it and wanted to make it better and demanded it be better, and that's what people rallied behind. And so, like, now it's the opposite of it, right? PlayStation 4 is huge again. And so, like, now you have all these people who are in flux, and you look around, you're like, you don't remember Super Rub-a-Dub. You weren't here. You weren't here for calling all cars, you know what I mean? But, like, it's always going to be that way with the projects you're passionate about. You're always going to find other people to do it, and Colin and I are very, very honored to be the voices, in a way, of that generation, that brand. You know what I mean? That's what I'm talking about. Like, PlayStation Experience was so crazy to go there and have all these people who knew us, and like knew us really well, and yell us about Simmels and Beyonds and whatnot.
Speaking of Shuhei, you've interviewed him several times and been around him a lot. It must have been nerve-wracking. But when did it start going from a professional atmosphere around him to a more relaxed, friendly one?
It would have been probably, the middle of the first E3 interview we ever did, the first time he ever came on Podcast Beyond. Because I remember, I'll never forget, because it was weird, because this was before, and it sounds crazy now because Shu's in video games and everybody knows him. But there was a time when PlayStation top brass wasn't like a big deal. You didn't know who Shu was, you know what I mean? Right. Like, I don't mean to be condescending about it, but like, in terms of a social presence, a big part of that is Beyond. Like you said, we lead the charge with this, so when we can point people to @YoSP, it means a big deal to them. And so, I'll never forget, like, he tweeted at me one day and said something about the show, and I had no idea who he was. But I saw it, and it was just like, his profile picture looked really professional, and then his name obviously is Japanese. And I was like, that's interesting. You click it open, it's president of Sony Worldwide Studios.
Right.
And it's like, whoa! And like everybody, like Colin and Ryan came to terms with the fact that this is happening, and I was like, well, let's try to get in for E3. And on the walk to interview him, Clements was quizzing me over and over again on how to say his name, because I don't know if you know this, I'm pretty dumb, and I have a really hard time with words that aren't simple, like wings. So like I had in my reporter's notebook on this walk to E3, I wrote down Shu, the word Shu, and then hey in all caps. And so he's like, say it again. And I'm like, Shuhei. And he's like, say it again. Shuhei. Not the last name. Yoshida. You know what I mean? Like, and so you sit down and like, you don't know what to expect, right? Because in the video game industry, obviously our history is, entrenched in the Japanese culture. And so like, they are a culture of, honor and different things. And I've interviewed so many people through translators. So there's like questions on that front of like, so does he really listen to Beyond? Does he understand who we are and what we do? Does he, blah, blah, blah. And like, you sit down and like, he immediately threw out some reference to something I had said on the show. And I think I say on the episode, like, wow, this guy really does listen to the podcast. And he's like, yeah, totally. And then we were fine and off to the races. Because again, if you're going to be so into Podcast Beyond or Kind of Funny or whatever, you're a best friend. You already know who we are and you know what goons we are. So I don't have to, if I would have fucked up his name, he wouldn't have been offended, right? Like, He understands exactly who we are.
Yeah, it seems like he goes out of his way to do stuff for the community and actually represent PlayStation.
I mean, you understand, like, he was nice enough to come to Podcast Beyond 300.
Yeah.
Like, he was away from his family in London, and I was like, hey, this is happening. He's like, I'll be there. And he came on his own. He did all these things that he didn't have to do. Like, you know what I mean? There was that's the kind of person he is. And he understands, like, how important that show is and how important we are and how important the community is to make that happen. And that's one of those things of why he's, like, one of the most special people I've ever met, and the industry would be better if there were a lot more people like him. But no, that's totally fair and fine, right? Like, I think in that respect, it's very much like when I started at IGN, and they were like, "Hey, we want to start putting editors on camera," and I was coming in as the new blood when just as the founders of the site were starting to burn out, right? And they're like, well, that's really, I don't want to be on camera. If the new guy wants to do it, let him do it. You know what I mean? Like, that's not what they want to do. Not that Shuhei's like this young buck out there doing crazy things, but like, he's drawn to do that. You know what I mean? Like, he's drawn to tweet. He's drawn to be that open, laughable guy who gets out there and has a great time and is goofy and talks about games and travels the world for his fans. Like, that's great.
So, Greg, before we wrap up the show, if somebody wanted to know where to find out more information about you, where would they need to go?
I would love if people came to kindafunny.com. It's KINDAFUNNY.com. Or you can follow me on Twitter at gameovergreggy. I have a whole bunch of stuff going on all the time.
Well, I'll let you get back to your work now. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Jesse.
Anytime you see me on Skype, you're more than welcome to give me a call.
You too, man. Thanks so much for caring about me. Thanks for letting me on your show.
Alright, bye.
Bye.